Aloha, everyone. My name is Vilsoni Hereniko, and I'm from Rotuma originally, which is part of Fiji, but I now live and work at the University of Hawaii. It's my pleasure to be chairing this panel. It should be an exciting one. The topic is anti-eugenics and arts and culture in the Pacific. So I'd like to begin by introducing our first panelist, who is Miri Hami. Miri Hami descends from Te Ahi, Haunui, Paparangi, Ngatirangi, Ngā Rauru Kitahi, and Ngati Tuwharetoa, and has ethnic and regional affiliations to Southeast Asia, specifically Singapore. Miri works in a variety of kaupapa Maori research with her hapu, or her sub-tribal communities, encompassing Maori music, eco-musicology, ethnomusicology, racism, and intergenerational trauma healing. Miri currently works as a kairangahau, or researcher for a kaupapa Maori development and liberation organization called Tutama Wahine o Taranaki, based in New Plymouth, Aotearoa. It's my pleasure to welcome you, Mary, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to share with us today.
I te timatanga ko te hia hia, mai te hia hia ko te maara, mai te maara ko te wakaro, ka pute ko te kupu hei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka nui te mihi kia koutou, kia kai kōrero, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka nui te mihi kia kaimahi mō te hui hui nei tēnā tātou katoa. Kei tihini pauri o mō tō tangata o Paranihitini mai te awa ki te moana, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Waio, ko Miri Hami tōku ingoa, ko Te Atianui a Paparangi, ko Ngā Rauru Kitahi, ko Ngāti Tuwharetoa, ko Ngāti Rangi, Ngā Iwi, no Singapura tōku mama, ko kairangahau au ki Tutama Wahine o Taranaki, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everybody, my name is Miri Hami and I am very excited to be here today. And aroha mai, I don't know how to work my slides from a PDF, like I usually do it full screen from PDF, but Zoom decided to change that for me. So we're just gonna keep on going with the show. So my presentation today is called Kiti Whiriwhiri ngā kaka ho e kore e whati. If the strands are weaved together, they will not easily break. And again, I'm kind of like in awe and in shock that I'm even here today and have been asked to present, but you know, I'm here and I will try and make the most of it. So my presentation is around the colonial harm of eugenics. How has it attempted to sever, dissect, and disconnect Māori, Indigenous New Zealand peoples of New Zealand Aotearoa from their creative expressions of maintaining well-being. So this presentation posits that if colonization and eugenics are centered on severing, that the collective weaving together or rebinding of customary creative knowledges are key to reimagining an anti-eugenic future. So this presentation will look at just like one creative knowledge that I love called waiata, and it's our songs, the songs of my people. And I want to use it as a pathway to reimagining an anti-eugenic future from an Indigenous, Māori, cis wahine, woman perspective based in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And just for those who are visually impaired, I have black and brown hair. I'm a light-skinned brown Māori woman from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm wearing gold earrings and jade pounamu. These are both from my whānau, my family and my friends, and I wear them at every presentation because the love of my family and my friends give me strength. So what led me to this kind of work as as it was said before, I work mostly in intergenerational trauma healing. So I was involved in this project called Whakatika, which looks at the racism impacts on health for Māori in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I've got two pictures of here of the literature reviews, which you can find freely available online. And it looks at a national perspective and also an international perspective. And within those literature reviews, under the amazing tutelage of Dr. Cheryl Smith, I was able to dive deep into eugenics as a tool of racism and also broadly as a tool of colonization. So eugenics in Oceania and within the context of Aotearoa can be I picked these two quotes because I think they directly summarize the impact that it is seen here. So the first quote is given by Moana Jackson, the late and great Moana Jackson, to Cheryl Smith, who made a report about the eugenic history within Aotearoa. And I quote, "It seems to me that eugenics shaped and was shaped by the broader context of colonization and was simply one of the more extreme manifestations of its basic discatarian dualism. It extended to Pākehā, so our European settlers, as undesirables, but that was just a perversively logical extension of the fact that Western culture had already defined the most undesirable in race terms," end quote. Cheryl Smith goes on to say in this report, and I quote, "Māori, like Indigenous peoples in colonized lands who suffered colonization, were cast as the unfit. The specific ways in which Māori were seen as unfit can be traced through many ways, including the labeling and classifying as primitive, as a lower social order, as physically and mentally less able, as socially deficient and uncivilized. One example was the way in which Māori and Indigenous were seen as weaker species when introduced diseases such as measles, chickenpox, TB took a huge toll on the population," end quote. These were some of the summations used around what is known as the depopulation of Māori, which is largely seen as how eugenics was perpetrated and impacted on Māori people in Aotearoa. And we still see the intergenerational trauma effects of that today, especially when it comes to the identity of Māori. So both Moana Jackson and Cheryl Smith conclude that eugenics is in itself an assertion, or colonization is in itself an assertion of eugenics. And something that inspired my presentation today was this quote taken from Shilliam, who wrote about Black Oceania. And he writes, and I quote, "Colonial science has never been concerned with deep relations. It is only concerned with cutting the ties that bind for the sake of endless accumulation, dispossession of Indigenous peoples to make way for the enslavement of other peoples, extraction of life force itself, mauri ora, from out of the soil, evaporating the blood," end quote. So eugenics is one of the many tools of colonization that, alongside anti-Blackness, dehumanization, racism, cis-heteropatriarchy, and capitalism, have attempted to sever Black, Indigenous, people of color, and colonized peoples from their own customary knowledges of well-being. So where I sit is usually in the domain of Māori oral histories. I love them. And one of those is waiata. So waiata can be described as our songs. It can be described as poetic and musical art forms that embody tonal, rhythmic, and mnemonic qualities, which aids in easy memorization of important tribal information. I look to waiata as a way to go back and to remember who I am. And waiata is more than music, and it extends beyond the Western implications of what music means. It's more than entertainment, and it's not an exclusive elite art. Waiata has been used to document the following: histories of our events, deeds of our ancestors. It maps environments so we know where to fish. And it also maps our whakapapa, which has been talked about today in earlier panels. It's our way of viewing the world, past, present, and future, but also is our genealogical layers. Waiata documents love. It documents our tangi, our losses, our political alliances, our changes. And also it works through sites of trauma. And it is about also restoring our health and our well-being. So waiata can be seen as an environmental and intergenerational and historiographical knowledge system that uses musical forms as a part of inherited legacy and for succession purposes. So how has eugenics and colonization impacted on waiata? Well, eugenics and colonization outcasted Māori with negative stereotypes of laziness, primitivism, savagery, as well as Māori language, which was the lifeblood of Waiata. Te reo Māori, our language, was seen as irrelevant. Our knowledge systems were seen as irrelevant. Māori became the other, we were not normal, and this empowered ideas of white supremacy and racism. So the Pākehā European settler dominance of what counts as legitimate knowledge and how this knowledge is taught are continual sites of struggle for Māori, and this is further reflected in Waiata analysis and as well as the way we teach it. So because of eugenics and because of colonization, this is how it impacted on Waiata. So it forced Māori to migrate into cities away from away for employment, but away from our ancestral gathering places and our homelands. These were the primary sites of where our Waiata was transmitted. It forced us off our ancestral homelands and off of our ancestors, our forests, our rivers, our mountains, our seas. It confiscated them, it polluted them, it demolished them, it changed their names, it rewrote them into history, and that affected all our Waiata compositions that regarded place names for mapping our territories. English language dominance through schooling and restrictions placed on our language affected the lifeblood of Waiata. It is the assimilative legislation created cultural dislocation from our whakapapa, our genealogy, and therefore our Waiata practices around our genealogy. Intergenerational trauma made barriers to returning back to our ancestral homelands and still affects Māori today. And in those ways, we're not able to learn Waiata in our own ancestral homelands. And heteropatriarchal systems denied the mana, the prestige of wahine, both women and takatapui, our gay, lesbian, and non-binary people in our society, as well as their Waiata compositions and their transmissions. Kia mai te pū, awakened at the origin. So this actually comes from a line of a Waiata, a ruruku, a chant. It was made when one of the canoes was made before coming to Aotearoa, New Zealand. It starts off with this line, Kia mai te pū, awakened at the origin. So Māori have continually asserted their tino rangatiratanga, our authority, and we have been weaving back the severs of colonization to reimagine an anti-eugenic, but also an anti-colonial future that honors both our ancestors, but frees our mokopuna, our future generations. One way that I've been able to do this is through using kaupapa Māori methodologies, which is a philosophical doctrine incorporating the skills, knowledge, and attitudes and values of Māori society. It's distinctly by and for Māori, it's anti-colonial, it's decolonizing, and it's re-indigenizing. This also includes using our Waiata, our Māori oral histories, as a way to serve as our type of literature for our own research. But there are many ways to rebind these threads. And one of the pictures I have here is a hinaki. It is used to, it's a net. It's used to capture our eels, which was our primary food source from my people from the Wanganui River in Aotearoa, New Zealand. If it wasn't for kaupapa Māori, if it wasn't for learning Waiata, I wouldn't know how to weave a hinaki today. So I can see that our people in different and in small ways are fighting for tino rangatiratanga, are fighting for an anti-eugenic and anti-colonial future where our knowledge is legitimate and our knowledge can bring us back home to where we need to be. So that's everything. Hia no, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Miri, for that excellent summary of your work. I'm sure you just scratched the surface of very, very important research that you are engaged in. There's a lot there to think about, and being a filmmaker myself, I can't help but think of the films of Miratamita and Barry Barclay, and the work that they are doing to do exactly what you are talking about in terms of decolonial work that restores to Native people their right to be treated with dignity and equality. And when you mentioned the Wanganui River, I can't help but think about movements to give that river its own rights, not to be polluted, and in that way, leading the charge, the global movement to Native people reconnecting with the environment. And we know what colonization has done to the environment. And so your reference to the displacement of Native language and Native ways of knowing is certainly key to eugenics and the damage it has done to Native people. And I just want to draw attention to your reference to the kind of work you're doing as a means of honoring the ancestors. And not only that, but also making sure that the future of our mokopuna, our children, those coming after us, are free of racist attempts to treat indigenous people as less than equal. I'm looking forward to hearing what our next panelist has to share with us. Arini Loda belongs to Ngati Raukawa, Te Ao ki Te Tonga, Ngati Whakawe, Te Whanau Apanui, and others. She currently works at Te Herenga Waka Victoria University of Wellington in the history program and lives at home on the lands of Ngati Mayotaki, Ngati Kapu Manawa Fiti, Ngati Pare, Ngati Koroki, and Ngati Huia ki Katihiku in the small town metropolis of Otaki. Current research projects include the Marsden-funded Ngahanganga Matua o Te Whakaako Hitori, Critical Pedagogies for History Educators in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with Nepia Mahuika, Richard Manning, and Veronica Tafai, and Storing Family Archives. Please forgive me, Arini, if I had butchered any of the very, very precious references to, your homeland and lands that are very important to you. Forgive me. Over to you.
Kia ora, thank you so much. Bilisoni, I'm such a huge fan of your work since forever. And of course, no apology needed. I was just sharing before that I just had the amazing fortune to spend the last couple of weeks in Fiji and trying to learn as much language while we were over there as well. And I had a wonderful exchange with so many people, te reo Māori, for Fiji, and just, it's a wonderful thing to try and to learn and to connect with people. I'll just share screen. Just want to mihi as well to kia koe e te tuahine e Meri. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction to this panel. And as I was sharing with my fellow panelists before, I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to attend other sessions in this really fascinating and I'm sure really deeply rewarding gathering. I've just been so busy trying to catch up on other work the last couple of days. Thanks also to Benedict for his amazing organisation and everything that he's done to get this together. Nā reira, e noho ana ki raro i te maru o te pai maunga o Tararua. Noho nei au ki o taki tata atu ki te awa o taki e rere atura ki te moana e papaki maira. So I'm fortunate enough, as Vilsoni said, to live at home. And what I want to talk about in a really kind of fast way, much as I can today, is this really striking play. And I'll just get into it then. Her family have departed. They have all departed, all of them, all Māori. She's the last, and now she waits to depart. And what remains? Te Arawa, Ngāti Awa, Tumu Te Varowaro, Enua Manu, Kukia Rani writer, producer, poet, Media George's 2005 play is a story which foreshadows the possibility of ethnic cleansing in New Zealand. It's set in the near future in a New Zealand which is bought into the one law for all rhetoric, whereby Māori people have been exiled en masse from New Zealand. It follows Mary, you can see here on the screen, a young Māori nurse waiting in Wellington Airport's International Departures Lounge for her flight out. Mary is preparing to leave New Zealand permanently, having discovered that she will be sterilised by a government birth control program on her 25th birthday as a response to what one character refers to as the Māori problem. Mary is the last Indigenous person to leave New Zealand. As her boarding call nears, a weary Mary finds the flight is delayed. She's confronted by the despairing Peter, her defiant Pākehā white New Zealander lover. Mary is also joined by others. Solomon, an anxious Samoan man who awaits his first flight abroad. Anna, a restless cleaner who has finished her day shift. And the worldly Isla who awaits her own flight. The cast is deliberately and specifically multicultural, with Māori, Iban Malaysian, Gujarati Indian, Samoan, and Pākehā characters. A note on the publication of the script requests that if staged, the ethnicity of the characters represented must be honoured as closely as possible. Ethnicity matters. In his 2018 journal article, Where Will This River Flow? Modernity, Indigeneity and Eco-Crisis in the Theatre of Media, George, theatre practitioner, scholar, writer David O'Donnell alludes to the originality of the play when he says that while the play can be seen as part of the wider Māori theatre movement, in form it is very different from the syncretic plays of the 1990s. These plays blended aspects of Māori culture with Western dramatological devices. George's play, however, is set in the future and draws upon techniques from modernist theatre. When the play was staged in England as part of the 2007 Pacifica Styles Performing Arts Festival, George described the play to British theatregoers as Indigenous science fiction. George's work pushes the boundaries and extends Māori theatre in ways that necessarily challenge New Zealand and specifically white and or colonially conservative New Zealand audiences. The Māori conception of time as a spiral rather than an arrow, as in the arrow of time, perhaps helps to collapse, perhaps reorientate or recalibrate. For those not familiar with Māori concepts of organising and understanding time, how past, present and future are woven together in the play. Response to the play, at least here at home, was, as noted in 2016 by the Pantograph Punch writer Adam Goodall, fierce, polarized, unprecedented. If aroha, that is like compassion, care, understanding, love, was in no short supply, there was plenty of whakariri, of riri, anger, despondency, perhaps. There was plenty of riri to go around as well. It was declared implausible by reviewers and dangerous by passionate audience members. And what remains drove a wedge through its audience. Perhaps more accurately, it drew the audience's attention to a wedge that already existed, and the audience blamed the show for its existence. As George herself reflected, the response from theatre-going audiences was, well, really tense. Other theatre practitioners, and again mainly women, told me that it was dangerous what I was doing and that I was a separatist and that it wasn't right. In his online published review, a white, middle-class, middle-aged, male theatre critic, and those are his words, by the name of John Smythe, concluded that, and what remains does not and cannot work either politically or theatrically because it takes an absurd premise to an absurd conclusion. We can appreciate skilled performances, stylish production values, and moments of clear recognition of ourselves. I think we need to think carefully about who ourselves is here, right? Each other and the political landscape we live in. But in the end, the 80-odd minutes of strutting and fretting upon this particular stage signifies little of value. Another pale, stale male critic, Laurie Anderson, had this to say: The play is, as Hone Koko writes in the program, unashamedly about politics, and it is a warning that our civil liberties are being eroded and that new injustices are occurring. But to leap from the foreshore and seabird controversy and other contemporary problems to mass deportations, ethnic cleansing, the Liberal government of 2010, forcibly, it was 2008 in the first production, forcibly sterilising all Māori women, and that Mary is the last Māori to leave Aotearoa, is a stretch, is to stretch rather credibility to the breaking point. The play was, writes David O'Donnell, at least in part, or more specifically at the time, a response to an anti-Māori backlash triggered in 2004. And I want to just clarify that there's never not anti-Māori backlash, if that makes sense. Like, I find it's something, of course, that just kind of, you know, simmers along, and then every now and then like boils up, but it's never something that's not there either. So this backlash triggered in particular at that moment, 2004, by Don Brash's Orewa speech and the Labour-led government's foreshore and seabird legislation. For those of you who aren't familiar with those events, Don Brash was the leader of the opposition National Party, and he made a controversial speech to the Orewa Rotary Club on 27 January 2004. And in this speech, he attacked the so-called grievance mode of Māori and so-called Māori privilege. And later the same year, the Labour-led government passed the Foreshore and Seabed Act, which removed customary Māori title to the foreshore and seabed. And this went on and goes on today. That act was subsequently repealed, replaced with another one, but you know, the underlying issues just rub on and on. So I'm particularly interested in this reaction of this inconceivable kind of idea, right? And this sort of complete division between a really big division between what Māori audiences thought, which I haven't mentioned yet, and what Pākehā audiences, how they received the play. So the cries of New Zealand colonists and the descendants of white colonial settlers frequently echo the repetitive refrain of this character, Vizzini, who was played by Wallace Shawn, in the cult's 1980s classic, The Princess Bride, and their incredulity at not only certain aspects of New Zealand history, in fact, but of present-day New Zealand. Inconceivable, they cry. And that feeling is stronger than something like incredulity. There's this real anger that goes along with it, and sometimes that turns to tears and other things. This isn't us. Oh, but it is, I would say. Moreover, as theatre practitioner and actor who played the lead role of Mary, Irina Daniels recalled, none of the brown people that I was around thought that it was inconceivable. We all can see how it has happened in the world's history, and we can all see how it could happen. Hone Koko says, and he directed the play, some of the most intense response came from older Pākehā, and they went, but we helped you. And we were going, it's not about you, it's about us. Media George herself said, I mean, it was wonderful that they came to the show, but unfortunately the show didn't inspire a dialogue, and instead it provoked a really angry response. So this response was really split. And I think it's at this point that if I'm going to make any kind of argument for my discipline, the discipline that incidentally I fell into called history, it might have some kind of superpower at this point, perhaps. New Zealand suffers some really thick historical amnesia. Of course, this isn't, you know, anything new to anyone in any settler colonial or other colonial context the world over. Eugenics was actually a really closer run thing in New Zealand than perhaps most New Zealanders think. We almost legalized eugenic sterilisation in the 1920s. Eugenics was then, on the one hand, one of the most prominent progressive movements of the early 20th century. On the one hand, enthusiasts could be found across the ideological spectrum. Debate raged up and down the country and here in New Zealand, in pubs, churches, newspapers. And against this backdrop, the Reform government introduced the Mental Defectives Amendment Act in 1928. Much of this bill was uncontroversial, but Clause 7 expanded the definition of a mentally defective person to include social defectives. Clause 11 included a eugenics board, created rather, the eugenics board. Clause 15 compelled the Director of Education to furnish the names of mentally defective children to the board. Clause 21 prohibited the marriage of people registered with the board, and Clause 25 authorised the board to sterilise those registered. It was debated, amendments were made, and eventually sterilisation was taken out of the bill. But the point is that there were fierce debates for and against. And I guess one of the things about history, though, is that we often pay attention to what has happened and kind of plot this sort of chronological these timelines to where we are now, and we often forget the sort of near misses, if you like, or the close calls. We may not pay attention. I don't think we pay attention enough to those. I'm not sure how I'm going for time here, and I can't see anything on the screen telling me to stop talking. So I guess I'll just keep going. So the 1928 bill's antecedents included public discussion and debate, as well as organised New Zealand eugenics groups, another kind of, I think, rather awkward thought for many New Zealanders today. And these groups in the early 1900s advocated sterilising those who were unfit to breed. They urged upper class and middle class women to stop using contraception and to breed more to stop the country being dominated by so-called defectives. What is not overtly stated or made clear is that New Zealand's upper and middle classes at this time were white. Over half of Māori workers at this time were labourers. And of course, I'm not talking about other cultures in the country and peoples in the country at that time who were also not white, who were of course here. As late as 1943, anthropologist Ernest Beaglehole observed there is a tendency to rank most Māori in a group equivalent in status to that of the lowest class white group. So I guess to just kind of bring it together to tie it up, if I can. Just checking the chat. Oh yeah. Next minute. So for Māori and others who live under the cold, hard, steel-capped boot of coloniality, every day, everywhere, constantly and consistently, the premise of the play and what remains and the questions that it asks are real, relevant, and urgent. Others may take or not take from it what they want, but as Coker said, maybe it simply wasn't about them.
Thank you so much, Arini. I was hoping you would continue for a while because I was just getting into it, and I find it so exciting having been a playwright, in a former life before I transitioned to cinema. I know the power of theater to really impact people. And it's a wonderful means by which one could become a provocateur, and raise issues of concern to people. And I have not seen the play that you referenced there, but your description of it makes me feel like I know what it's about. And thank you for reminding us that history does repeat itself a lot of the time. and how important it is for historians and playwrights and other storytellers to remind us that the inconceivable is only there because of a lack of imagination, and a reminder that history is more like a spiral than a linear progression is a good image to hang on to, because as a spiral, it could turn in on itself, and it does turn in on itself, right, to the center, toward the center. So thank you so much for provoking us to think about a lot of issues, including the role of the artist and the role of the critic. Sometimes I'm torn because I kind of straddle both, but a lot of the time I remind myself of this, that artists lead and the critics follow. The critics are only there because the artist had done something for them to criticize. In any case, I'd like to thank you again. I really enjoyed your presentation, Irini, and I look forward to discussing, the play more with you when we get a chance later on. I want to move on to Alana Lopesi, who is our third panelist. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Indigenous Race and Ethnic Studies at the University of Oregon. There, she teaches across her research areas of Pacific Islander studies, indigenous feminisms, and contemporary art. She's the author of False Divides and Bloody Woman. We look forward to Lana's presentation.
My name is Lana Lupisi. I am Samoan from the villages of Satsupala and Sumu, by way of Aotearoa, New Zealand, where I was born and lived until recently, when I moved to Eugene, Oregon, the land of the Kalapuya peoples. And here I work at the University of Oregon in the Department of Indigenous Race and Ethnic Studies. Before I start, I just really want to thank the organizers of the conference and also my incredible fellow panelists. I'm really sorry I can't be in the Zoom world with you all in real time, but I am currently teaching and I'm trying my best to rush over in time to be able to join you all in conversation. So really appreciate the accommodations and still being able to contribute to what has been an incredible 2 days. So I wanted to share a bit today on Pacific futurities and sort of visioning an anti-eugenics ocean, namely through 2 artworks, to think about how artists are doing kind of some of this work. So when colonialism turned its sights to the Pacific, it brought with it all sorts of fictions of racial difference and gendered inferiority. These fictions became embedded in our communities, in the new churches that took hold, and sometimes within our own practices and ways of knowing the world. And perhaps one of the most perverse fictions was that of our smallness, which belittled us and worked and continues to work to separate and divide us from each other. For Indigenous peoples and diaspora, the way in which our own subjectivity figures can be trapped within the imaginary of the settler colonial society that we make home. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the colonial imaginary is the central imaginary, which from the 16th to 20th centuries was institutionalized through mechanisms like the census, cartography, and museums. The Moana, or the Pacific, as an idyllic region of disparate and dislocated islands occupied by noble savages and dusky maidens, is a prime example of a colonial imaginary. This was solidified by artists and writers who fictionalized and archived this imperial feel of the Moana in artworks and literature. Pacific artists still today have to contend with the colonial imaginary as reigning over the Pacific. There is a perverse way in which an imaginary can become invisible, hiding behind a guise of progression, making people forget it was created in the first place, and perpetuating that imperial feel. However, reinvigorating the notion of the imaginary to talk about society and its institutions places the creative element of society into the fore and reminds contemporary Pacific artists of the political and emancipatory nature of radical imagination. we have to remember the point of imagination for these fictions, because when we see that everything at one point was imagined, we can begin to imagine ourselves beyond the present. I've always been inspired by artists' capacity to imagine otherwise, and also speak back to colonial fictions. And so I want to just share a couple of artworks that speak to a future imaginary. Hopefully that is looking good. So I want to show this artwork that actually my colleague here at the University of Oregon, Abigail Ginju Lee, shared with me recently, and it's just kind of been something that's really stayed on my mind since she shared this work. It's called Kai Hai, which is a collaboration between Kanaka Maoli and artist and filmmaker Tiare Ribo and Chinese artist and technologist Kin Kan Ye. So we're actually going to enter into another world here. So Kai Hai, a hybrid of ocean in Olelo, Hawaii and Chinese, is a series of virtual and augmented reality installations that map ocean surfaces and draw on trans-Pacific stories, oral histories, and remixes the ancestral, personal, and speculative stories about the Pacific Ocean. So I'm kind of trying to show you a little 360 view that you can like move all around if you want to. It's pretty fun. But I'm gonna just keep us over here while I chat. So I thought we could have a look around their exhibition in this platform, what we call New Art City. So we have a 3D model of the island of Oahu. You can kind of see it in the background there, but you can go right up close and personal and actually sort of through and under the island too in your own time if you want to. And the island floats above a kind of black reflective ocean. And then we also have here two goddess figures. So this one here, the white one that we can go and look close up to, is called AAG and described as a trans-Pacific deity born from submarine fiber optic cables and the desire for human connection across the Pacific Ocean. AAG stands for the Asia-America Gateway submarine cable system that has landing points in places like California, Hawaii, Bento Island, Hong Kong, Guam, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. The goddess is a hybrid of the organic and the inorganic that has come from the interconnection of geographies, machines, physical undersea infrastructure, and the deep sea creatures that grow on its metal piping. Representing nonlinear pathways of communication streams across the ocean of both histories and future destinations, they can appear in many places and times at once, enabling the flow of the internet across the world. And then if we turn around here, get closer, here we have another goddess figure, Nakili, a deity which is inspired by the deity Hina Opuhala Koa, Hina of the coral stomach, and is a goddess of corals and spiny creatures in the ocean. On Nakili's body are many coral forms found near the shores of the Hawaiian Islands, which support the vast amounts of marine life. Nakili positions the corals above water, merging it with a human-like figure to remind us of our interconnection to it and to all living creatures in the ocean, of which the Kanaka Maoli are descended from, according to the creation chant, the Kumulipo. And then between them both is this film work here. I've turned the sound down, but there is sound that you can listen to. And what you hear is a conversation between these two oceanic deities from different sides of the world. And then partway through the conversation, the deities hear another voice that belongs to an unnamed ocean being. And through the conversation, they talk about the state of humanity, the state of the ocean, and the technology that has grown across it too. The film also draws on ancestral and ecological context of the ocean to reflect on humans, not the other way around, which reminds us that the ocean is not something that can be split. It has its own life force that is so far beyond all of us. So if people have sought to represent our ocean as a force for separation, this artwork reminds us of the ways in which we are connected and how we can reconfigure that connection, or I suppose get to know each other again, build coalition, and refuse the hole in the donut narrative. visioning our ocean in ways that make sense to us. Through imagining futures and literally creating spaces, we can think about Indigenous regeneration of sovereignties and relation. Okay, so I'm going to get out of there, hit on this other tab. So I want to share with you one of my favorite all-time artworks that I will take any opportunity possible to talk about and share with people. And that's Lift Off by Kanaka Maoli, Itoke, Samoan, and Pākehā artist Ahilapalapa Rams. And what I actually want to do, if the technology allows, is play us a few minutes from this demo. Okay, I'll leave that there. I hope the sound wasn't too loud and jarring for people. But I hope this just gives you a snippet of the larger work. It is kind of small to look at, but it is sort of 3 channels. But imagine, that these projections are the height of the room that you're in right now, and that'll give you a sense of what the sort of full artwork feels like in terms of the scale of the visual, but also that sort of the beat of the kumuhula. So past, present, future converge in Rand's Liftoff. The installation includes a 10-meter, 5-layer tinsel wall and this 3-channel installation animation that we just looked at. In one channel of the installation, a kumuhula plays a hula beat, and the other 2 channels show satellite footage of the telescopes on Mauna Kea. As the kumuhula drums, the telescopes hula and lift off the mauna, and eventually they explode into confetti, restoring the mauna to its pre-telescopic self. The desecration of Mauna Kea by telescopes is a dystopian reality that Native Hawaiians have been living through. While protest movements have successfully halted the construction of the 30-meter telescope, the idea that the existing observatories will ever be removed can feel like an immense proposition that requires a profound act of imagination. This is exactly what is presented in Rand's work, an artistic offering of hope and refusal of the present into the future. You could locate Liftoff within a growing canon of Indigenous futurism through its use of radical imagination and science fiction tropes. An Indigenous futurist approach to art-making projects Indigenous life into the future imaginary and refuses the colonial imagined present. So artists help us to imagine futures beyond our current environment. Imagining our futurity is part of our well-being. It's part of connecting our future to our past. And it visions an anti-eugenics future because we are in it. Fijian Tongan producer and legal scholar Batia Tuiburulevu says it well when she notes, when so much of the work of oppression is policing the imagination, visualizing, actualizing, and manifesting new worlds threatens the implicability of power unjustly formed. By representing Moana subjectivities as a source of order, new futures emerge that aren't refracted through the colonial prism. We are what we remember, and we are what we imagine. And if I could also just end on some more words of an artist, Samoan Māori artist and Indigenous futurist, Coco Solid. She notes, quote, I believe Indigenous knowledge can save the world and lead us to a futuristic frontier that only historic cautionary clues can author. Futurism for me is the ultimate inversion and return. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Lana. That was excellent presentation to follow from Irini's, continuing to look at the power of the imagination to imagine alternative futures, alternative realities. I couldn't help but think, wow, that installation of Mauna Kea seems to be demonstrating what some people might think is inconceivable. But the thing is that in a work of art, such as the installation, it is conceivable. And just seeing that installation with the telescopes, you know, almost kind of, I don't know, are they dancing to the beat of the pahu, or are they kind of disintegrating? But it's a very empowering image for Native Hawaiians and for indigenous people as well, to realize that in an installation or a theater, a piece of theater, or a film, different realities can be brought to light. And so it seems to me that it might be a wonderful time for us to have a little discussion together. But if I may talk a little bit about my thinking in relation to eugenics and issues to do with racism in Oceania and also the world at large. For me, I guess I'm so concerned about finding solutions to racism, to eugenics, and the damage it has done to Native people especially. And that led me to thinking about the Va, the space between people and the natural world, the space between the living and the dead, males and females, the space between different entities. And so very briefly, I believe that the concept of Va in certain Polynesian cultures is that of a space between, a space that connects by dissolving or integrating borders that separate humans from each other. There is no racism in this sacred and spiritual space. Instead, in this space of potential, creativity, and wonder, we become conscious that we are all interconnected and that we are each other. Like water, fluidity connects us all to each other in the Va. Is this a model for humanity as we seek equality for all? And with that, I wonder if all the panelists could come on and we can have a brief conversation for maybe about 10 minutes or so. Thank you again to Miri, to Arini, and to Alana for so efficiently, in such a short time, summarizing your incredible research, your work for us. It's not an easy thing to do, to distill, you know, decades of research and work into just a few minutes. Maybe I can throw out this question and see if, you know, we can get started on some sort of conversation. I just wonder whether with, in terms of finding solutions, which I guess where I'm very much focused on, I wonder if you have any thoughts on where do we go from here? I think the story of what colonization has done to Native people in terms of, you know, whether it's displacing them from their lands, forbidding their language, you know, the performances, etc., has been drastic, and it's something we would never wish on our children or our children's children. Do you have any thoughts on what you think might be solutions to the problem? I think art is certainly one way to go, and I'm glad that Arini and Lana touched on that, reimagining futures that are different. But I wonder, let me ask Mary if she has any thoughts on that. Shall we start with you?
Ka pai. I just also want to say ngā mihi nui kia koutou mō tō kai kōrero. So thank you to everyone who's talked today. I've just been in awe at seeing the different ways in which we are reimagining anti-eugenics, anti-colonialism through art. Like I'm stoked. I feel really inspired, actually. So for me, what comes to mind is this panel. I think we're already doing it, just in different art forms, whether that be doing plays, whether that be through digital art, as we've seen, or we've seen it through music. So while I think that we should try and revitalize and kind of normalize our traditions or our customary knowledge systems, like as I presented through Waiata, we should be creating new ones. We should be reimagining it. We should continue it. We should continue to compose, to do playwrights, to do plays, to do art. Like we should continue all of this stuff and take all that knowledge that our ancestors fought to carry on for us. So I mean, this whole thing has inspired me to like compose a waiata over it. Like I just want to write something. Like it's so inspiring being in this space even, and seeing how just, that digital art just really blew me away. So I just think, I hope that answers the question. But just as we do the old, we should be doing the new is kind of my solution. I think we're already doing it. Like I'm inspired. Yeah, I hope that answers it. Kia ora.
Yeah, what about you, Arini? Any thoughts?
Yeah, totally, Mary. I agree with all of that, and that animation, that work, that artwork. Sorry, it looked like animation to me on my screen, but it was just stunning. I was just absolutely kind of mesmerized by it, and then it slowly settled on me the significance of the music and what was happening, and those are telescopes. And as I was kind of going, holy, like what I mean, like it just opens up a whole new fantastic, like yes, I would just love to see so much more of that. I guess in terms of like, and I totally agree, Mary, like so many of us are doing this work. So the next thing that I kind of think like I was trying to think and what might be a next step after that. And again, lots of us are doing this, but maybe making sure that we are making as much space as possible for more people to get into the space. Do you know what I mean? I mean, what are we doing? Arts funding is such a, I could swear, but you know what I mean? Like it's such a, at least in New Zealand, it's a real tough gig, and not just that. So, like how do we do more in our everyday to support our practitioners, our artists, our creatives? We've been talking for about the last decade, perhaps even longer, about in academia about the death of the arts, the death of humanities, funding here and other places getting channeled into the STEM subjects and everything like that. And we're sitting in the arts and humanities going, come on, it's so important that we paint and write and sing and these kinds of things. So, I think we've really got to advocate and also bring our children with us, bring our young people with us, and create space in those ways. Hey, and just I'm continually looking at myself in the mirror recently and saying to myself, hey, am I making space today or trying for more students, for more young people, for more babies to experience different kinds of, do you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. And I've started to think a bit more kindly about educating the other people in our country.
Well,
about educating yep.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Arini. If I can talk a little bit about music, I'm glad you brought that up, Miri. And one of the things that I have seen happen even at conferences, academic conferences. I also see it quite a bit in movies, like by Mira Tamita and Barry Barclay, in which sometimes there is a conflict or tension between Pākehā and Maori, and then the Maori people in the audience would just burst into song, and somehow song just, it does something. That intervention to me is something I often think about, because it seems that when people are exchanging heated words, verbally, it's at a certain level, but music, and by extension, art in general, I think takes the conflict to another dimension, to what I like to call the realm of the trans-rational, where things are no longer rational, but we moved into a higher consciousness that seems to kind of, to me, dissolve boundaries. And I don't know whether that is the space of the Va, but we move into the realm of feelings. And quite often when that happens, the Pākehā are lost. Like they just don't know how to operate in this dimension of, the trans-rational. And I wonder if you two have any thoughts on that, because art, I think, tends to do that, but music particularly. You hear a great opera or a great waiata or great mele, and somehow it's like you just melt. You just melt into the feelings that you feel in your na'au, as they say in Hawaii. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I immediately kind of got brought back to a story my father told me of so I think you hinted at this before, Vilasoni, about the Whanganui River. So that's where my people are from. And in the lead up to attaining legal personhood, they have to go through the Waitangi tribunal process. And it's where we as a tribe and the Crown have to try and negotiate. It's very, very long and arduous. And my father told me of a hui that he attended in the lead up to that. And our own people started fighting, and we also started fighting with the Crown. And so all of them stood up and just burst into song. The song was called Te Aroha. Now, anyone who's attended any New Zealand high school will know that song. It's 4 lines. It's easy to remember. It's quick and easy. But the idea was to bring everyone back to toe, or bring everyone back to what you've talked about as the va, to that trans-relational space, so that we can, we need to stop that. We shake it off, come back. And so after that, after bursting into that song, that's where Te Aroha actually came from, which was written by Morven Simon. And so in the end, after that, everyone kind of was able to come back together and reconfigure those hard negotiations that needed to be had. So I'm immediately brought to that story my father told me, that he was there in attendance, and those hui are very fun to be at. Those meetings are very fun. So I'm like, I understand him wanting to be in there in the drama of it all. But yeah, I agree. Music, and by extension the arts, I think is able to touch us. And something that I've learned in learning about waiata, especially in the context of our grieving, how Māori grieve, especially during tangi or our funeral rites, is that when we sing waiata tangi, when we sing these funeral songs, they allow us to feel all of our emotions. We're allowed to cry, we're allowed to wail, we don't have to be self-conscious. We're actually able to tap into all of our emotional range as Māori. And I feel like music, and by extension art, can also give that to us. It gives us the ability to feel the emotional range that we often get disconnected from as a result of colonial science, eugenics, keeping things in isolation, dissecting things. Everything is in silos, and so we're not allowed to connect to our fuller emotional range. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, but it just brought me back to some fun times that my dad has had on his journeys.
Thank you so much, Amiri, that you put things so eloquently there. Thank you. I couldn't have done it better. I wonder if you have any final words, Arini, to add. Anything you would like to add?
Just agree. I wonder, as you were both talking, I started thinking about the idea of oceanic code or something, because I thought that, you know, there are, of course, our amazing visual arts and weaving, carving, whakairo, many things in our amazing ocean and oceanic world. But I thought there still seems to be something really particular about song, about waiata, about chant, about mele, about these things that just push it into another space. And as you said, Vilsoni, you know, like Pākehā seem to just, and, you know, other peoples just seem to get absolutely lost, like in that space. And yeah, I wonder if it's, yeah, because I also love how it can bring us together across I don't know, across our islands and our peoples as well, and that shared kind of, you know, we have hundreds and hundreds of languages in the Pacific, and yet that language of song and dance is, I don't know, I think of it maybe as some kind of oceanic code or something.
Well, thank you for that. What you did just then for me is you made me think back to, of course, you know, something that was mentioned earlier, and that is what colonization has done in terms of the erasure of native language and ways of knowing and ways of dreaming. And, you know, when I think back to the fact that the dances are one of the things that the missionaries, it seemed to kind of terrify them when people not only burst into song, but burst into dance. Now that those two together is just somehow seemingly overwhelming, you know. And when we talk about colonization, we mustn't forget, you know, the whole mission project, the bringing native people to the light. And as part of that, because they're, you know, primitive and in the dark, then we needed to get rid of all these things that are emblematic of what it means to be, you know, in darkness or primitive. And dance and music and songs are very much part of that. And so it's very exciting that these things are coming back big time. And then we have, of course, a lot of us are very competent in the new tools, you know, social media, the new technologies, whether it's virtual, you know, reality or filmmaking or playwriting or TV, episodes and so on and so forth. So we have a lot more tools to play with in terms of, evening the playing field so that everyone gets a chance. And I love the fact that I may close here. I'm so glad. I think it was you, Arini, who mentioned the children, you know, the young people coming after us, and the importance of thinking about them and what we leave behind. So if those telescopes were to disappear, then our children and our children's children might get to enjoy the pristine mountains that our ancestors once enjoyed. So I guess it's time for us to move on to our final panel of deliberating on takeaways from the various panels. But I wanted to thank Amiri and Arini again. I really enjoyed this. I wish we had more time. Please, if you ever come to Hawaii, look me up and we can continue this conversation. So thank you very much. Aloha.